The CIA doesn't send its director to enemy soil unless the situation has already passed the point of no return. John Ratcliffe didn't call Havana. He didn't send an envoy. He boarded a plane, flew directly to Cuba, and walked into a room with the man who actually controls the island's intelligence apparatus. And before his plane had even cleared Cuban airspace, the Justice Department made a move that sent a message louder than anything said in that room. If you've been following this story, you already know things are accelerating. If this is your first time here, stay with me, because what happened on a single Thursday in May changes everything we thought we knew about how this ends. No CIA director has stepped onto Cuban soil for operational talks since the early 1960s. These conversations happen in neutral countries, Panama, Mexico City, Canada, places where deniability is baked into the geography. Ratcliffe bypassed all of it. He flew direct to Jose Marti International Airport and sat across from Alejandro Castro Espin, the grandson of Raul Castro, a man who holds no official government title and doesn't need one. He is widely believed to run Cuba's entire intelligence apparatus. A former State Department official told Reuters that his presence in the room meant the real decision makers were there, not the ceremonial government. A former CIA station chief told the New York Times that no director has made this trip in over 60 years. Think about what that means. This wasn't a diplomatic courtesy call. This was a deliberate, calculated, in-person delivery of something too sensitive to trust to anyone else. The message, according to U.S. officials who spoke to the New York Times, came with conditions. The United States is prepared to address Cuba's economic and security crisis, but only if Cuba makes fundamental changes. And these are not incremental requests. Shut down every Russian and Chinese intelligence facility on Cuban soil. Open the economy to American investment. Begin political reforms on a timeline of months, not years. And the offer expires. What makes this specific demand so significant is not the surface-level security logic. Russia operates at least 2 signals intelligence facilities inside Cuba, one near Lourdes outside Havana, another near Bijucal, assessed by the Pentagon as capable of intercepting military communications from MacDill Air Force Base in Florida, home of U.S. Central Command. China opened its own listening post in 2019, positioned along Cuba's northern coast to monitor Atlantic and Caribbean naval operations. U.S. intelligence estimates more than 200 Chinese technicians work there. Closing those facilities doesn't just satisfy a security demand. It severs Cuba's relationships with the only 2 major powers still willing to engage the island. Russia and China haven't just been strategic partners. In the last 3 months, they have been the only countries still shipping fuel. Washington isn't asking Cuba to close buildings. It's asking Cuba to fire the last friends who still show up. Drop your prediction in the comments right now. Does Cuba take the deal, or does it call the bluff? Hours after Ratcliffe left the island, the Justice Department confirmed it is moving to indict former President Raul Castro himself. The charges remain sealed, but multiple outlets report they involve decades of alleged terrorism support, narcotics trafficking, and the harboring of American fugitives, convicted killers and hijackers who have lived in Cuba under government protection for decades. Now consider the sequencing. Ratcliffe sits across from Castro's grandson in the morning. By evening, the grandfather is being charged with federal crimes. That is not coincidence. It is a message delivered in 2 acts. The first was spoken in a room in Havana. The second was filed in a courthouse. The combined signal to Alejandro Castro Espin was precise. We offered you a path forward, and then we indicted your family. Imagine what comes next if the answer is no. The same day all of this happened, Cuba's power grid collapsed again. Eastern provinces, including Santiago de Cuba and Guantanamo, went dark for 18 hours. Hospitals ran backup generators. Some ran out of fuel. Cuba's state energy company confirmed it has 11 days of reserves remaining. 11 days. That number includes emergency stockpiles designated for hurricane season. Videos shared on social media showed hundreds of people in the streets of Santiago demanding electricity and food. Security forces dispersed the crowds. An analyst at the Center for Strategic and International Studies told the Miami Herald that Cuba has not faced this level of pressure since the Soviet collapse in 1991, when GDP contracted by a third. Cubans who lived through that period call what is happening now Special Period 2. But the comparison has a critical difference. In the 1990s, Venezuela eventually arrived as a new patron. Credit came from China. The Soviet generation still believed in the project. Today, Venezuela's oil has completely disappeared since Maduro's capture. Russia sent 2 tankers in March and then went silent. China sends economic advisors and no fuel. Energy analysts told Reuters the crisis goes deeper than the shortage. Cuba's power plants are Soviet-era infrastructure, most over 40 years old. Even if sanctions were lifted tomorrow, rebuilding the grid would take months. Now, here is where this story becomes something different from every previous Cuba crisis. The civilian government, Diaz-Canel and the Communist Party, cannot accept Washington's terms. Accepting them would mean formally ending the revolution. The ideology, whatever remains of it, cannot survive openly welcoming American capital and dismantling Allied intelligence operations. The civilian leadership would rather the island stay dark than sign that document. But the military calculates differently. Cuba's generals control roughly 60% of the economy through the military's commercial empire. They are not ideologues. They are pragmatists wearing ideological uniforms. And pragmatists, when the fuel runs out and the indictments begin, make different decisions than true believers. Ratcliffe did not fly to Havana to negotiate with Diaz-Canel. He flew to sit across from Alejandro Castro Espin, the man positioned between the civilian government and the military, the man who could facilitate an internal transition that the civilian leadership cannot survive, but the military might accept. The international reaction confirmed that nobody is coming to stop this. Russia called the visit a provocation and offered no fuel. China said it respects Cuba's sovereignty and announced no aid. The European Union urged dialogue. Mexico offered to host talks in Cancun. Neither Washington nor Havana said yes. The Organization of American States held an emergency session. The vote to condemn U.S. pressure on Cuba failed. 18 countries abstained. Governments that once reflexively defended Cuba against American pressure are now going silent. In every previous chapter of this crisis, the silence was temporary. This time, it looks structural. I have covered this story daily for 5 months across more than 25 reports. I started this series in January, tracking a fuel blockade that most analysts dismissed as routine pressure. What I have watched since then is a sequential, deliberate closing of every exit. The fuel supply, the allied relationships, the financial lifelines, the personal, legal exposure of regime leadership. Each mechanism reinforced the others. Each closure narrowed the space where the government could survive. I have maintained analytical distance across all of those reports. I want to set that aside for a moment and tell you directly what the evidence looks like from where I am standing. I cannot find a historical parallel where all of these conditions existed simultaneously and the government in power survived. East Germany in 1989 had some of them. The Soviet Union in 1991 had some of them. Venezuela, before Maduro's capture, had some of them. Cuba in May 2026 has all of them at once, with 11 days of fuel remaining. Every previous prediction of Cuban collapse was wrong because a patron arrived. The Soviet Union, then Venezuela, then limited tourism revenue. Someone always showed up with enough to keep the lights on. No one is coming now. Russia issues statements. China sends advisors. The lights are already off across half the island. I could be wrong. Cuba has survived every analyst who predicted its end for 67 years. The government has a resilience that conventional modeling consistently underestimates. But every one of those survivals had one thing in common. Someone sent fuel. No one is sending fuel. The CIA director just left the room. 11 days. What comes next will not wait for a scheduled update. It will not telegraph itself in advance. It may arrive as a deal announced without warning, a military statement that rewrites the government overnight, or a collapse that happens faster than anyone modeled. I don't know which one it is. What I know is that the question this series set out to answer in January, whether sustained American pressure could force a fundamental change in a 67-year-old government, is approaching its answer right now, in a country running on 11 days of reserves, in the dark. So here's what I want from you. Drop your final prediction below. Dated, on the record. When this breaks, and I believe it breaks soon, this comment section becomes the archive of who saw it coming and what they thought would happen. That is worth something. Hit the like button if this daily coverage has given you analysis you cannot find anywhere else. One tap is enough. If you want to be here when the final chapter lands, subscribe. This story started with a fuel blockade in January. A CIA director just touched down in Havana in May. Whatever comes next will not wait for anyone, and neither will this channel.